11 days after the crash, my wife looked at my legs, looked at the tubes running into my arm, and said the one sentence no doctor could repair. "You're useless now, Daniel." She didn't scream it. That would have made it easier somehow. She said it softly, almost tired, like she was reading the total on a grocery receipt and didn't like the number. The room was pale blue from the hospital lights, the kind of light that makes every face look honest whether it wants to or not. A monitor beeped beside me, steady and patient, counting the seconds after my marriage stopped breathing. I tried to move my left foot. Nothing. I tried again, harder, because a man will argue with his own body before he admits the truth. Still nothing. My throat felt dry from the breathing tube they had taken out that morning, and my ribs ached every time I pulled air in. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled over tile. Somewhere outside, traffic moved through Columbus like life had not paused for me at all. Melissa stood by the window with her arms folded, her blonde hair pulled back, her wedding ring catching the weak winter sun. She looked beautiful in the clean, distant way expensive things look in a house where nobody laughs anymore. I wanted to ask if she meant it. I wanted to believe pain medication had twisted the words, that my mind had made something ugly out of fear. But her face told me everything. No shock, no regret, no rush to take it back. Just that small, disappointed line around her mouth, the one she used when a waiter forgot her order or when my paycheck came with too much overtime and not enough dinner reservations. The last thing I remembered before waking up in that bed was snow falling sideways across Interstate 71, my hands locked on the steering wheel, headlights smearing through the glass, and a minivan sliding where it should not have been. There had been a horn, a flash of red, and the sickening silence that comes right before impact. Then nothing for 11 days. People later told me I had helped save a family. The local paper would call it quick thinking. The fire captain called me lucky. The surgeon called it complicated. Melissa called it the end of the life she thought she married into. I stared at the blanket over my legs, at the shape of a body I suddenly did not recognize. 42 years old, structural engineer, father, husband, the man who fixed porch lights, paid the mortgage early, and drove through storms because somebody had to check the bridge reports before morning traffic. I had spent my life making sure things held. Steel beams, deadlines, promises. A little boy sensed that his dad could handle anything. But lying there under thin hospital sheets, I could not even lift myself without a nurse. Melissa stepped closer, and for 1 second, I thought maybe she would touch my hand. Instead, she picked up her purse from the chair. "I can't do this forever," she said. The zipper sounded loud in the quiet room. I turned my head toward her, slowly, because even that hurt. "Do what?" My voice came out rough, barely mine. She looked at me then. Really looked. Not at my face, but at the rails on the bed, the plastic pitcher, the walker folded against the wall like a warning. "This," she said. "Hospitals. Bills. Therapy. You needing help with everything." The word everything hung between us, heavier than any cast, sharper than any scar. I wanted anger to come. I waited for it. Anger would have been warm. What came instead was cold and clear. A kind of quiet that settled behind my ribs and made room for memory. Melissa smiling at our wedding in Charleston. Melissa holding Ethan the day he was born. Melissa telling people she loved that I was dependable, that I was solid, that I was the kind of man who showed up. I understood then that she had loved the showing up more than the man. She had loved the paycheck, the steady hands, the shoulders that carried grocery bags and stress, and every problem she did not want to touch. Now those shoulders were pinned to a hospital bed, and suddenly I was not a husband. I was a burden with a last name. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame, and said, "Ethan is with my mother tonight." That was the first thing that cut through the numbness. Our son, 8 years old, brown-eyed, missing one front tooth, still young enough to believe I could come home and make the world normal again. I swallowed hard and nodded because if I spoke, my voice might break, and I refused to give Melissa that sound. After she left, the door eased shut with a soft click. No slammed exit. No dramatic goodbye. Just a click. That was how quietly a life could split in half. I lay there listening to the monitor, to my own breathing, to the hallway moving on without me. My fingers curled into the sheet until the tape on my fore pulled at my skin. I did not cry. I did not call her back. I looked at the walker against the wall, then at the empty chair where my wife had been, and I made the first promise of my second life. If useless was what she saw when she looked at me broken, then one day she would have to stand in front of the man I rebuilt from that wreckage and beg him to remember her differently. Before the crash, I was the kind of man people called steady without ever asking what steady cost. My name was on the mortgage, my truck was in the driveway, my coffee was brewed before sunrise, and my boots were usually by the back door with road salt drying in the seams. I was 42 years old, a structural engineer in Columbus, Ohio, and most mornings began the same way. Alarm at 5:30, shower by 5:40, black coffee in a travel mug by 5:58. I would stand in the kitchen while the rest of the house slept, looking over bridge inspection notes under the yellow stove light, trying not to wake Ethan when I opened the garage door. He was 8 then, all elbows and questions, the kind of boy who could turn a cereal box into a spaceship and a rainy Saturday into an adventure. If he heard me leaving, he would stumble into the hallway in his dinosaur pajamas and whisper, "Bring me back a cool rock, Dad," because he thought construction sites were treasure fields. I always did. A piece of smooth river stone. A rust-colored chip from a safe pile of gravel. Nothing special to anyone else, but to Ethan, it was proof I had remembered him even while the world was asking for everything I had. Melissa used to smile at that. Years earlier, she would lean against the counter in one of my old sweatshirts, hair messy, face soft from sleep, and tell me I worked too hard. Back then, it sounded like love. Later, the same words carried a different weight, as if my long hours were not sacrifice but embarrassment. She liked the life my work built. The 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood near Worthington, the white SUV in the garage, the dinners where her friends admired the kitchen remodel, the summer weekends at Lake Erie when she could post pictures that made everything look effortless. What she did not like was the dust that came with it. The missed reservations when an emergency inspection ran late. The tired way I sat down at the end of the day. The phone calls from contractors during Sunday lunch. She wanted the finished bridge, not the steel, sweat, and math holding it up. I told myself that was normal. People change after 12 years of marriage. Love gets quieter. Bills get louder. A man learns to accept smaller smiles and call them peace. Most of my work was not glamorous. I inspected overpasses, reviewed load calculations, argued with city officials about safety margins nobody noticed until something failed. My office smelled like printer toner, old coffee, and wet coats in winter. My coworkers joked that I could spot a hairline crack from 50 feet away. They were not wrong. I trusted numbers because numbers did not pretend. A beam either carried the load or it did not. A foundation either settled evenly or it warned you with little fractures before it gave way. Marriage, I thought, worked the same way. Pay attention. Repair small things early. Keep weight distributed. Show up before the structure complains. So I showed up. When Melissa wanted to leave her marketing job and start consulting from home, I said yes and covered the gap. When her mother needed help after surgery, I drove across town twice a week. When Ethan had a fever, I sat beside his bed with a thermometer and a bowl of chicken noodle soup while Melissa slept because she said she was exhausted. I did not keep score. That was my mistake. I thought not keeping score made me good. I did not realize someone else might be keeping one in secret, counting every inconvenience as evidence against me. The winter before the crash, the air in our house started to change. Nothing dramatic. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just small silences where warmth used to be. Melissa stopped asking about my day and started asking when I would be home. She stopped saying she missed me and started saying Ethan missed me, like affection had become a message she was tired of delivering. At dinner, her phone stayed face down beside her plate. When I reached for her hand in the grocery store, she adjusted her purse instead. I saw the cracks, but I explained them away. Stress, weather, middle age, a rough season. Men like me are experts at repairing everything except the truth. We tighten loose screws, patch drywall, replace filters, check tire pressure, and tell ourselves love is still there because the lights still turn on when we flip the switch. The morning of the accident, Melissa barely looked up from her laptop. Snow tapped against the kitchen window, soft and steady. Ethan was at the table, building a waffle tower with too much syrup. I kissed the top of his head, and he handed me a small gray rock from his collection. For luck, he said. I put it in my coat pocket and smiled. Melissa said, "Try not to be late tonight. My mother is coming over. Not be safe. Not call me when you get there. Just do not be late." I remember that now more clearly than the crash itself. I remember the cold coffee in my hand, the blue light from her screen on her face, the way she did not see me leave because she had already started living like I was gone. The accident itself came back to me in pieces, never in order, never when I wanted it to. A strip of gray sky, the squeak of windshield wipers fighting ice, the weight of Ethan's Lucky Rock in my coat pocket. I had been heading south on Interstate 71 before sunrise, sent out to review a bridge approach after a night of freezing rain. The city had salted the main roads, but black ice has a way of making confidence look foolish. My truck heater was blowing warm air against my hands, and the radio was low, some morning host laughing about school closings. I remember thinking Ethan would be happy if his district closed. I remember wondering if Melissa would be annoyed about having him home while she worked. Then traffic ahead of me slowed. Red taillights blurred through the snow like a warning written in water. A minivan in the right lane began to drift, not fast, not dramatic, just wrong. That was the thing people do not understand about disaster. Sometimes it does not announce itself. Sometimes it slides quietly into your lane and waits for you to notice. I saw a woman behind the wheel, one hand lifted as if she was trying to calm the children in the back. My training kicked in before fear did. I eased off the gas, checked the mirror, and angled my truck to give her space. The next seconds became all sound and light. Tires hissed. A horn cried out. A delivery box truck behind me could not stop in time, and everything I knew about distance, speed, and control became useless math on a frozen road. I did not feel pain at first. I felt pressure, then silence, then a strange floating calm, like being underwater with my eyes open. When I woke up 11 days later, everyone else had already built a story around what happened. The state trooper said my truck position kept the minivan from sliding into the concrete barrier. The fire captain said 3 children made it home because of those few seconds. A nurse told me their mother had come by twice and cried in the hallway. I nodded because nodding was easier than understanding. Hero was a word strangers used when they did not have to watch you learn how to sit up again. In the hospital room, hero did not mean much. It did not make my left leg respond. It did not lower the stack of medical forms on the tray table. It did not soften Melissa's mouth when the surgeon explained months of therapy, possible permanent nerve damage, and no guarantee I would return to field work. She listened with her arms crossed, asking questions that sounded practical but landed like verdicts. How long before he can drive? How much help will he need at home? What will insurance cover? When can he work again? Not once did she ask if I was scared. I was. More than I had ever been in my life. Not of the pain. Exactly. Pain had a schedule. Pain came with medication times, ice packs, and nurses who wrote numbers on charts. I was scared of the look on my son's face when he saw the walker. I was scared of the stairs in my own house. I was scared of becoming a room people entered with forced smiles and left with quiet relief. But fear is a private language for men raised to be useful. You swallow it, clear your throat, and ask what comes next. When Ethan finally visited, he stood near the doorway holding a card made from construction paper. Melissa had dressed him in his blue winter jacket even though the room was warm, and his hair was still messy from sleep. He looked at the machines first, then the bandages, then my face. I smiled as hard as I could. "Hey, buddy," I said. His chin trembled, but he walked over and placed the card on my blanket. It showed 3 stick figures outside our house. One had a cane. Above it he had written, "Dad comes home soon." That was the first time I almost broke. I reached for him, slow and careful, and he leaned into me like he was afraid I might disappear if he pressed too hard. Over his shoulder, I saw Melissa watching from the corner. No tears, no relief, just impatience wrapped in a polite expression. Later that afternoon, when Ethan went with my mother-in-law to get a snack, Melissa shut the door halfway and lowered her voice. She said the house was not set up for this. She said ramps were expensive. She said she had calls, clients, responsibilities. Every sentence began with reality and ended with blame. I lay there listening, my hands folded over the blanket, feeling the shape of my old life move farther away. The crash had taken my strength in one instant, but Melissa was taking something slower. She was taking the dignity I had left and measuring it against convenience. That night, after she went home, I asked the nurse to turn off the television. The room settled into the soft hum of machines and distant footsteps. I reached into the plastic bag of belongings beside my bed. My wallet was there, my cracked phone, my keys, and Ethan's small gray rock, scratched but whole. I held it in my palm until it warmed. Outside. The window, Columbus glittered under snow and streetlights, ordinary and unreachable. I did not know how I would stand again. I did not know how I would work, drive, pay bills, or walk my son to the bus stop. But I knew one thing with a clarity that made the room feel colder. The accident had revealed more than damaged nerves and broken plans. It had revealed that the woman beside me had been waiting for a reason to stop pretending I mattered. For the first week after I woke up, Melissa became the kind of wife strangers admired. She arrived at the hospital with brushed hair, soft sweaters, and coffee she never drank, setting it on the rolling table like a prop in a scene she had rehearsed in the elevator. When nurses came in, she touched my shoulder. When doctors explained therapy schedules, she nodded with that concerned little frown people trust without asking questions. When visitors stopped by, she stood close enough to be photographed, but not close enough for me to feel her warmth. Online, she was even better. A picture of her hand resting over mine appeared on Facebook with the caption, "Please keep Daniel in your prayers. He is the strongest man I know." 300 people liked it. Women from her consulting circles commented with hearts and folded hands. My old co-workers called her a rock. One neighbor wrote, "You are such an amazing wife." I read those comments at 2 in the morning with the phone brightness turned low, the hospital room dark except for the monitor glow, and felt something inside me fold quietly in half. Because the woman they praised was not the woman who looked at my walker like it was a stain on her carpet. She was not the woman who sighed when I asked for help lifting the water pitcher. She was not the woman who stepped into the hallway to take calls and came back smelling like cold air and irritation. In public, she called me brave. In private, she called my recovery overwhelming. That was the word she chose. Overwhelming. Not painful. Not frightening. Not unfair. Overwhelming. As if my damaged body was a scheduling problem that had landed on her calendar without permission. The hospital staff loved her at first. Why would they not? She brought muffins to the nurses' station. She asked for extra blankets in a voice that sounded tender. She kept a notebook of medications and appointments, though she rarely wrote anything useful in it. But people who spend their lives around pain learn to notice what visitors do when they think nobody is watching. One night, I woke from a shallow sleep and saw Nurse Angela standing near the door with fresh water. Melissa sat in the chair beside my bed, scrolling on her phone, her face flat and blue in the screen light. My call button had fallen to the floor. I had been trying to reach it for several minutes, breathing through the small humiliation of needing help for something so simple. Angela picked it up before Melissa even noticed. Our eyes met for 1 second. She did not say anything. She just placed the button in my hand and gave my shoulder a careful squeeze. That small kindness almost hurt worse than Melissa's distance. It reminded me what help was supposed to feel like. The next morning, Melissa posted another update. Long road ahead, but we are taking it one day at a time. We. That word sat on the screen like a lie wearing clean clothes. There was no we in the quiet hours. There was Melissa in the lobby complaining to her mother about ramps, bills, and how she could not possibly run a business with all this going on. There was me in a hospital bed practicing how to shift my weight without gasping. There was Ethan at home asking when Dad would be able to play catch again. One afternoon, he came in holding a paperback book and climbed carefully onto the chair beside me. He started reading out loud because he said voices made rooms less lonely. Melissa corrected his pronunciation twice, then checked her watch. After 20 minutes, she said they had to go because she had a client call. Ethan's face dropped, but he nodded the way children do when they learn disappointment is easier if they make it smaller. I wanted to tell him to stay. I wanted to promise I would be home soon and everything would feel normal again. Instead, I squeezed his hand and said, "You are doing great, buddy." He leaned close and whispered, "Mom gets mad in the car." The words were so soft I almost missed them. My chest tightened, but I kept my face calm. At what? He looked at the floor. Everything. That night, Melissa came back alone. The hallway lights were dim, and rain tapped against the window. She dropped her purse into the chair, rubbed her temples, and said, "Your son is having a hard time with this." Your son, not our son. I stared at her, waiting to see if she heard herself. She did not. She kept talking about school pickup, grocery delivery, physical therapy, insurance deductibles, and how people expected her to be strong. Her voice had a polished sadness in it, The kind she used for public sympathy, but there was no grief underneath. Just resentment wearing makeup. I listened until she ran out of breath. Then I asked, "Do you want me to get better, Melissa? Or do you just want this to be less inconvenient?" Her eyes sharpened. For a moment, the performance slipped. "That is not fair," she said. Maybe it was not. Maybe nothing about that room was fair. But fairness had stopped being the point. I looked past her at the dark glass of the window and saw my reflection, thin, pale, half hidden behind tubes and railings. She saw a problem. The internet saw a brave husband. The nurses saw a patient. Ethan saw his dad. I needed to decide which version of me was going to survive. The first paper Melissa asked me to sign came on a Thursday, folded inside a blue hospital folder like it belonged there. She arrived just after lunch, when the room smelled faintly of disinfectant and weak chicken broth, and the pain medication had turned the edges of everything soft. I remember the way her heels clicked across the tile, quick and certain, the sound of a woman who had somewhere better to be. She kissed the air near my cheek, set her purse on the chair, and pulled the folder from under her arm. "Insurance forms," she said. "Just routine." Routine is a dangerous word. It lowers the guard. It makes a man tired of being difficult. At that point, I had spent 2 weeks being touched, measured, turned, scanned, and explained to by people wearing badges. Every day came with another form, another consent, another signature on a line I could barely see without squinting. So when Melissa placed the papers on the tray table and handed me a pen, I did not suspect a trap. I suspected paperwork. The worst traps often dress that way. My right hand shook when I reached for the pen. Not from fear. From weakness. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I had spent my adult life signing inspection reports, contracts, safety approvals, things that carried weight because my name meant something. Now my signature crawled across the page like it belonged to an older man. Melissa watched it happen. Not with sympathy. With impatience. "Do you need me to help?" she asked. I shook my head and finished the last line. She slid the papers back so fast the corners scraped my knuckle. "This will make things easier," she said. I wanted to ask, easier for whom? But the medication pulled me under before the words reached my mouth. 2 days later, Mark Sullivan walked into my room carrying a paper coffee cup and wearing the same navy overcoat he had worn since law school. Mark and I had known each other since college, back when I calculated bridge loads on cafeteria napkins and he argued with professors for sport. He had become a small firm attorney in downtown Columbus, the kind of lawyer who knew judges by name and still changed his own oil on Saturdays. He looked at me for about half a second before hiding whatever he felt. Good friends do that. They see the damage, then give you the dignity of not staring. "You look terrible," he said. "You always did lead with honesty," I said. He smiled, but it did not last. He set the coffee on the table and pulled a chair close. "Daniel, did you authorize Melissa to manage the temporary settlement funds?" The room seemed to quiet around that sentence. Even the monitor sounded farther away. "What settlement funds?" I asked. Mark's jaw tightened. He opened his leather folder and took out copies, neat, highlighted, already arranged like evidence. Insurance correspondence. A preliminary injury payment. A limited power of attorney. Bank transfer confirmations. My name was on all of it, but it felt like reading about a stranger who had made terrible decisions in his sleep. The first payment had been deposited on Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, most of it had moved into an account I did not recognize. Melissa's separate business account. My fingers went cold around the blanket. She said they were routine forms. I said. Mark looked at the 4-line in my arm, the bed rails, the walker in the corner. His face changed then, not dramatically, just enough. Anger under professionalism. Routine forms do not move money out of your reach. I stared at the paper until the numbers blurred. It was not the amount that broke something in me. Money can be earned, lost, replaced, fought over. It was the timing. She had done it while I was learning how to sit upright. While Ethan was drawing cards with crooked hearts. While strangers online were calling her amazing. She had stood beside my hospital bed, held a pen over my weak hand, and turned my trust into access. There are betrayals that arrive like thunder, loud and obvious. This one arrived in a blue folder with clean edges. Mark leaned forward and lowered his voice. "We can challenge it. Medication, capacity, disclosure, intent. There are ways to handle this. But from this second forward, you sign nothing without me seeing it first." I nodded slowly. My throat worked, but no sound came out. I looked toward the window. The glass reflected a man I barely recognized, pale and thin, with bruised shadows under his eyes and a hospital gown hanging loose at the collar. For the first time since the crash, I did not feel helpless. I felt informed. There is a difference. Helpless is lying in the dark, wondering why the ground disappeared. Informed is seeing the edge of the hole. When Melissa came in that evening, she carried flowers from the grocery store and wore the soft expression she saved for nurses. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I looked at her hands first. Perfect nails. Wedding ring shining. The same hands that had placed the pen in mine. "Tired," I said. It was true, just not the way she thought. She arranged the flowers by the sink and talked about Ethan's homework, her client calls, and a ramp estimate from a contractor she claimed was outrageous. I let her talk. I did not mention Mark. I did not mention the transfer. I did not ask why. Men in movies demand answers. Men in real life learn that answers given too early only teach liars what to clean up. So I stayed calm. I watched. I listened. And when she finally left, I reached for my phone and texted Mark 3 words that felt heavier than a signature. "I believe you." Melissa brought me home on a gray Tuesday afternoon in February, and the house looked smaller from the passenger seat. The front steps I had climbed 1,000 times now looked like a problem somebody forgot to solve. A temporary metal ramp stretched over them, slick with melted snow, and I sat there in the driveway staring at it while Melissa checked her phone behind the wheel. "Physical therapy starts Thursday," she said, not looking up. "They said you need to be realistic." Realistic. That word had become her favorite way to make surrender sound mature. Mark had arranged for a home health aide to help the first few days, but Melissa insisted she could manage appearances until then. The neighbor across the street waved from her porch, and instantly Melissa changed. She smiled, hurried around to my side, opened the door, and placed one careful hand on my arm like we were in a commercial for devotion. "Take your time, honey," she said loudly enough for Mrs. Donnelly to hear. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because some lies are so polished you can see your reflection in them. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and distance. She had moved the coffee table to make room for the walker. She had rolled up the hallway rug. She had cleared my side of the bedroom and replaced the small armchair with a plastic shower seat still in its box. Everything was practical. Nothing was tender. Ethan came running from the kitchen and stopped short when he saw me gripping the walker. His face did something brave and terrible. It tried to smile before it understood how. "Hey, buddy," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Race you to the couch?" He looked at the walker, then at me, then nodded like he had been handed an important job. He walked beside me slowly, matching his steps to mine, one small hand hovering near my elbow without touching. That nearly broke me. Melissa stood near the stairs watching us with a grocery bag in one hand and impatience in both eyes. For 3 days, I learned how far away everything in my own house had become. The bathroom was 10 miles. The kitchen was 20. The stairs might as well have been a mountain range. At night, pain moved through my legs in dull waves, and I lay awake listening to Melissa breathe on the far side of the bed like a tenant waiting out a lease. On the 4th evening, I came out of the bedroom and found 3 suitcases by the front door. Not hidden, not accidental. Lined up neatly, handles extended, like they had been waiting for me to be strong enough to notice. Ethan stood halfway down the stairs in his socks, one hand on the railing. Melissa was in the foyer wearing her tan wool coat, the one she saved for client dinners. Her makeup was perfect. Her face was empty. "Where are you going?" I asked. The walker creaked under my hands. She exhaled like I had asked something childish. "To my mother's for now." "For now," I repeated. She looked past me toward the living room, toward the framed family photos I had hung myself, each one suddenly looking like evidence from a life neither of us could enter again. "Daniel, I am not equipped for this. I cannot be a nurse, a driver, a therapist, and a wife. I have a business. I have a future." Ethan's voice came from the stairs, small and tight. "Mom." She turned toward him with that public softness, the fake kind that always arrived when someone might judge her. "Sweetheart, Daddy needs special care right now." Then she looked back at me, and the softness disappeared. "He needs nurses now, not a wife." The sentence landed in the foyer and stayed there. Even the furnace seemed to go quiet. I wanted to step toward her, to stand tall enough that she would remember who I had been, but my left knee trembled and the walker shook against the floor. She saw it. Worse, she let me see that she saw it. Do not make this harder, she said. You can barely stand. Ethan made a sound like he had been holding his breath too long. That sound saved me from answering the way I wanted to. I looked at my son, at his white knuckles around the railing, and swallowed every sharp word in my mouth. A man can lose a wife in front of his child, but he does not have to lose himself. Melissa picked up the smallest suitcase. I will come by for some things later. Mom will help with Ethan until we decide what makes sense. No, I said. One word. Quiet. She blinked, surprised by the shape of it. I shifted my weight, pain flashing hot behind my eyes, and kept my voice level. Ethan stays in his home. Her mouth tightened. You are not in a position to make demands. I thought about the blue folder. The transfer. Mark's warning. The way she had mistaken my silence for confusion. You would be surprised, I said. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. Just a flicker. Then pride covered it. She rolled the suitcase to the door, opened it, and let cold air sweep across the floor. Before leaving, she looked back and said, You are going to see how hard life is without me. The door closed behind her, not loud, but final. Ethan did not move for a long moment. Then he came down the stairs and stood beside me. Is she coming back? He asked. I looked at the door, at the wet footprints fading on the mat, at the walker holding me upright like a temporary promise. Not tonight, I said. He slipped his hand into mine. Small, warm, trusting me when I had no idea how to trust myself. I squeezed it gently and looked around the house she had abandoned because it no longer served her version of comfort. The place was quiet, wounded, and still ours. That was the night I stopped waiting for Melissa to become kind again. That was the night survival became a schedule, a custody plan, a therapy routine, and one simple rule written deep inside me. I would not let my son learn that love means leaving when someone becomes inconvenient. The first month without Melissa did not feel like freedom. It felt like learning the shape of every weakness in my body and every silence in my house. Mornings began before sunrise, not because I was disciplined, but because pain kept its own alarm clock. I would lie there staring at the ceiling while the furnace clicked on, counting my breaths until the first wave settled enough for me to sit up. The walker waited beside the bed like a metal witness. Some mornings, just getting to the bathroom felt like crossing a state line. I hated that. I hated the careful turns, the slow steps, the way my hands gripped handles instead of tools. But hatred, if you aim it right, can become fuel. Dr. Rebecca Hayes understood that before I did. She was my physical therapist, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s with a calm voice and no patience for self-pity. The first time she came to the house, I tried to joke my way through the evaluation. She let me make 2 jokes, then handed me a resistance band and said, Daniel, charm will not rebuild your legs. I liked her immediately because she did not treat me like glass. She treated me like a man with work to do. 3 days a week, she made me stand, shift weight, bend, stretch, and breathe through the kind of discomfort that did not care about pride. I fell once in the hallway, not hard, but enough to shake Ethan from the kitchen. He came running with cereal milk on his chin and fear in his eyes. I smiled from the floor like I had chosen to sit there. Bad landing, I said. Rebecca looked down at me and said, Then get better at taking off. So I did, inch by inch, step by step. The first time I made it from the bedroom to the kitchen without stopping, Ethan clapped like I had crossed a finish line at the Olympics. I laughed, then looked away so he would not see what that sound did to me. At night, after he finished homework and went to bed, I opened my laptop at the dining room table. The same table where Melissa used to complain about invoices and late dinners became my office, my workshop, my way back into the world. I started by reviewing the crash reports Mark had requested. Weather data, road surface readings, traffic patterns, bridge approach angles, salt application schedules. At first, I told myself it was for the legal case, but something deeper pulled me in. I had spent years inspecting structures after problems appeared. What if roads could warn people before the danger became visible? What if a bridge approach could report ice risk in real time, not after the first vehicle lost control? The idea started as notes in a yellow legal pad, then diagrams, then models, then long nights of code I had to teach myself between pain medication schedules and custody emails. I called it the Carter Road Safety Grid, though at the beginning it was just a tired man at a dining table, trying to turn the worst day of his life into something useful. Mark helped from his side, too. He filed to challenge the transfer Melissa had made, documented the conditions under which I signed, and made sure every conversation went through email. No emotional debates, he told me. Facts leave footprints. Melissa hated that. She texted at odd hours, sometimes cold, sometimes sweet, sometimes pretending concern for Ethan was the reason she needed access to the house. I answered only what mattered. School pickup, medical appointments, legal documents. Nothing else. The less I gave her, the more her mask slipped. Meanwhile, Ethan and I built routines that felt small but saved us. Pancakes on Saturday, even if I had to sit on a stool while flipping them. Reading at night, even when my eyes blurred. Physical therapy charts on the refrigerator, where he marked each completed session with a blue star. One evening, he stood beside me as I practiced walking with a cane instead of the walker. 3 steps. 4. 5. My knee trembled, sweat ran down my back, and the living room seemed to stretch longer with every breath. "You have got it, Dad," he whispered. I wanted to believe him, so I took one more step. That was how rebuilding happened. Not in one dramatic moment, not with music swelling or people cheering, but in quiet rooms where nobody saw the cost. A man does not become whole again because the world apologizes. He becomes whole when he stops asking the people who broke his trust to explain his worth. By spring, I could make it to the porch with a cane. By May, I could drive short distances. By June, the first working model of my safety grid ran on my laptop, mapping freeze risk across a test corridor outside Columbus. I sat there at 2:17 in the morning, the screen glowing. Blue. Ethan asleep upstairs, the house finally quiet in a way that no longer felt empty. For the first time since the hospital, I did not feel like I was surviving Melissa's absence. I felt like I was building something she would never be able to claim. By the end of summer, the house had changed in ways Melissa would not have recognized because the changes were not expensive enough to impress her. The ramp was still out front, but now I walked past it some mornings with a cane instead of using it. The dining room table still held my laptop, but beside it sat printed diagrams, city maps, sensor cost sheets, and a row of blue stars Ethan refused to take off the refrigerator. The air felt different. Not happy every minute, not easy, but earned. Then Mark called on a Monday afternoon while I was testing a new model for road surface temperature shifts. His voice had that measured tone lawyers use when good news still needs paperwork. "The court granted the temporary freeze," he said. "Melissa cannot move another dollar from the settlement account, and the transfer she made is under review." I sat back slowly, the cane leaning against my chair, the screen glow resting on my hands. "Does she know?" "She is about to." He paused. "And Daniel, she is not going to take it well." He was right. 40 minutes later, my phone lit up with her name. Then again. I let it ring. A year earlier, that sound would have pulled me like a fire alarm. Now it was just noise from a room I no longer lived in. The emails came next, first angry, then offended, then careful once she remembered lawyers read things. She said I was punishing her. She said she had only tried to protect the family. She said Mark was poisoning me. She said a lot of things, but she never said she was sorry for putting a pen in my hand when I was too weak to understand what she needed from it. That was when I knew the court case was not only about money. It was about forcing the truth to stand somewhere it could not decorate itself. In September, the city transportation office agreed to review my safety grid. Mark knew a deputy director from an old zoning case, and won. Introduction turned into a meeting in a municipal building that smelled like floor wax and burnt coffee. I wore a gray suit that hung looser than it used to, walked in with a cane, and set my laptop on a conference table in front of 6 people who had no reason to believe in me. My left leg ached from the parking garage. My palm was damp around the handle of the cane. But when the map appeared on the screen, all the noise inside me went quiet. Numbers I understood. Risk models I understood. I showed them how surface temperature, traffic weight, slope angle, drainage history, and local weather feeds could identify dangerous bridge approaches before the first emergency call. I showed them the corridor where my crash happened. I did not make it dramatic. I did not need to. Facts have their own gravity when you arrange them honestly. One engineer leaned forward. Another stopped taking notes and just watched the screen. The deputy director asked if the model could run across county lines. I said, with the right sensor network, yes. That was the first time in months someone looked at me and saw capacity before limitation. 2 weeks later, they offered a paid pilot program. Not a fortune, not yet, but enough to open a door I had been building toward in the dark. By November, a regional infrastructure company wanted licensing rights. By December, the first check cleared, and I sat in my truck outside the bank for 10 minutes with both hands on the steering wheel, breathing like a man who had reached shore and did not trust the ground yet. I did not call Melissa. I called Mark. Then I picked up Ethan from school and took him for burgers and fries at the diner near High Street. He asked why I was smiling. I told him something I built worked. He dipped a fry in ketchup and said, "I knew it would." Children can make faith sound simple enough to believe. Melissa found out the way people like her always find out, through someone else's admiration. A local business journal ran a short piece about the pilot program, using an old photo from the transportation office meeting. There I was, standing with a cane beside a screen full of road maps, my name under the headline. Former crash survivor develops safety technology for Ohio bridges. The article was modest, but modest success looks enormous to someone who bet against you. That evening, her messages changed. No more accusations. No more legal threats. Just a soft, careful text that read, "I saw the article. I am proud of you." I stared at those 5 words for a long time. The old version of me would have wanted them. The hospital version of me would have begged for them. The man sitting at that dining room table felt nothing but the faint chill of recognizing a door that used to matter. A week later, Mark told me her attorney wanted to discuss repayment terms and separation agreements. Her business account had problems. Her mother had stopped covering expenses. The friend whose guest room she had used was moving. The life she left to protect was shrinking around her. I did not celebrate it. That surprised me. I had imagined victory would feel like thunder. Instead, it felt like snow falling quietly over a repaired road. Clean. Cold. Final. On the last Friday before Christmas, I walked without the cane from the kitchen to the front window. 10 steps. Not perfect. Not painless. But mine. Outside, headlights slowed near the curb, then moved on. For a second, I thought of the woman who had once walked out with suitcases and told me I would see how hard life was without her. She had been right about one thing. It was hard. She had been wrong about the rest. Melissa came back on our wedding anniversary, because some people only remember dates when they need them to mean something. It was a Thursday night in January, cold enough for the porch boards to creak under the frost, and Ethan was upstairs finishing a science project about weather patterns. I was at the dining room table reviewing the final licensing draft when headlights washed across the front window and stopped. For a moment, I did not move. The house was quiet in that deep winter way, heat humming through the vents, snow tapping softly against the glass, my cane leaning against the wall more out of habit than need. Then the doorbell rang. One clean note. Not frantic. Not confident. Just small. I opened the door and found Melissa standing beneath the porch light with a photo album pressed against her coat. Her hair was damp from the snow, her makeup carefully done but tired around the edges, and the woman who had once walked out with suitcases now looked like she had been carrying something heavier than luggage. "Daniel," she said. My name sounded different in her mouth now. Softer. Less certain. I stepped onto the threshold but did not invite her in. That was the first truth between us. She looked past my shoulder into the warm hallway, at the framed picture Ethan had drawn on the table by the stairs, at the home she had left because it no longer matched the life she wanted. "Can we talk?" she asked. I studied her face. There had been a time when that question could turn me inside out. A time when I would have opened the door wider before she finished asking. That man had been useful to her. He had not survived. "You can say what you came to say," I told her. The cold air moved between us, clean and sharp. She hugged the album tighter. I made mistakes. It was a careful start, the kind lawyers and guilty people both prefer. I was scared. Everything happened so fast. The accident, the bills, Ethan struggling, your recovery. I felt like I was drowning. I let her words settle without reaching for them. Snow gathered on the sleeve of her coat. "You did not leave because you were drowning," I said. "You left because I could not carry you anymore." Her eyes filled, but I had learned that tears can be real and still not be honest. "I missed you," she whispered. "I missed our family." From upstairs, Ethan's chair scraped softly against the floor. We both looked toward the sound. Melissa's face changed when she heard him. Hope flickered there, quick and hungry. That was when I knew I had to end it clean. Not for revenge. For my son. I reached to the small table beside the door and picked up the envelope Mark had prepared that afternoon. Inside were 3 things: the repayment agreement for the funds she had moved, the final separation documents, and a custody schedule that kept Ethan's life steady. I handed it to her. She looked down before opening it, as if paper had become something dangerous. What is this? The truth, organized. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the first page. I did not enjoy watching her read it. That surprised me too. After everything, I thought some part of me would want the scene to feel bigger. I thought victory might sound like a raised voice or a slammed door. Instead, it sounded like snow falling and my son breathing upstairs and my own heart staying calm. Melissa shook her head. Daniel, please. We can fix this. I thought about the hospital room, the blue light, the click of the door when she left. I thought about Ethan standing on the stairs while she told me I could barely stand. I thought about the nights I practiced walking from the couch to the kitchen while my hands shook and my boy clapped like hope was a job he had taken seriously. Some things can be repaired. Some things can only be replaced by a life that does not require them. The crash broke my body, I said. You broke my trust. One of those healed. Her face folded then, not dramatically, not like the movies. Just a woman finally understanding that the door she expected to reopen had become a wall. I loved you, she said. Maybe she believed that. Maybe in her way, she had loved the roof, the paycheck, the clean version of marriage where I solved problems before they touched her. But I was done mistaking need for love. No, I said quietly. You loved what I made easy. Behind me, I heard Ethan step onto the landing. I did not turn around, but I knew he was there. I could feel his silence, careful and awake. Melissa saw him over my shoulder. Ethan, she said, and her voice cracked. He did not come down. He held the railing and looked at her with the sad caution children should never have to learn. That look did more than any court order could. It showed her the cost without me saying another word. I placed one hand on the doorframe, steady on my own feet. Mark will handle the rest, I said. Good night, Melissa. For a second, she looked like she might argue, but the papers in her hand had more authority than her performance. She stepped back into the falling snow, the photo album still pressed against her chest, full of pictures from a life she could no longer use as a key. I closed the door gently. No anger, no shaking, no weakness, just the quiet click of something finished. Ethan came down the stairs and stood beside me. Are you okay, Dad? He asked. I looked at the cane by the wall, untouched. I looked at the dining room table where my work waited, at the blue stars still on the refrigerator, at the warm light filling the house we had kept. Then I rested my hand on my son's shoulder and told him the truth. I am getting there. And for the first time, that was not a promise I was making to survive the night. It was a fact.